So what was it? Oh yeah, one of my friends asked me a question. I thought it was a really good question because I'd never really considered it before. And he's kind of new into the whole hobby thing. He started, I think, 6 months ago or so, maybe even less than that. And he asked me, he said, "Hey Max, do you remove, do you clean your miniatures? Sorry, you clean your miniatures. That's the thing. Do you clean your miniatures before or after you assemble them?" And that is a really good question. Because I've never really, again, stopped to consider this. And there's pros and cons to both of these. So let's kind of dive into this. First, let's do cleaning the miniatures before you assemble them, which is what I do and what I've been doing since forever. The obvious pro of this is you don't risk breaking your miniature. And I usually do this for bulk stuff. I never assemble like one miniature, or rarely, if ever, assemble one miniature. I postpone it and postpone it and postpone it until I have like a lot of miniatures to assemble, and then I just like put on a movie or put on like, I don't know, like a TV show with like 19 episodes, and then I just go to town and assemble stuff until I want to cry, right? That's my thing. Assembly is not one of the part of the hobby that I enjoyed the most. Now, some people, they just like love it, not me. So I kind of I bunch it up, and then I also bunch my assembly method, whereas I clip all of my little pieces from the sprues, set them aside, and then once they're all clipped out, then I take my little scraper or my little X-Acto knife, and then I scrape away. And then once all of my pieces are scraped away, then I put out the glue, and then I put everything together. So that's kind of my process, and it works for me because I do, again, lots of miniatures at a time for my own personal reason of like batching jobs, and also because that's usually what I paint, right? I paint armies and rarely paint less than a unit, so rarely build less than a unit, right? If you clean them and then you paint them before assembly, I mean, you kind of need to, right? So if you're big into like sub-assembly and stuff and partial assembly or painting literally on sprue, some people do that, and it's a valid strategy, because like for hard to reach places or stuff that you can airbrush different ways or even shaker can different ways, well, you kind of need to clean them beforehand, which is, I think, how my own kind of assembly routine got started, is because I started to airbrush and shaker can the ever loving crap out of like a million minis, and well, just I need to clean them before I actually paint them, and I paint them in like partial assembly. So really looking at after, which after has a lot of pros, and the main one being, well, you save a lot of time because a lot of the mold lines you don't end up seeing on the final miniature, right? Like you put it all together, and then you look for like mold lines where you can see them. So like the one that's like inside the leg under the cape and everything, well, you know, that thing's never getting cleaned off because nobody's gonna see that. So that's kind of, I think you can save some time like this, especially with like Games Workshop minis that are like so well put together. Like the way that the sculptor, or I don't even know if it's a human at this point, like maybe just a computer that does it for him. But the way that they're like designed, the mold lines are almost always invisible. So then there's really little cleanup to do on Games Workshop pieces, except like the new Marines that I think besides the helmet, usually you're like really good to go with very few mold lines. So in those minis where you really don't have a lot, well, just assemble them and then you look for these mold lines that are like two on the mini, and you go like thank you, goodbye, and you're done. And then the biggest con to this is when you glue your model, sometimes you need pieces cleaned off, right? Like again, going back to the Space Marine, the top half and the legs, the joint in there, usually there's like a little mold line, or you need some cleaning to make sure it fits. So then you kind of end up like working twice, where in my process, the long game, if you will, it doesn't really work out because I clip them all and then I want to put them together, but I do need to clean some pieces. So you end up having to clean them twice in that regards. So that's kind of maybe, not great. And I guess the only upside to this method that I see is really if you're like an hardcore player that you want to just like build your stuff and play with it like on plastic. Like if you play like armless, like Space Marine, like no arms, no guns, whatever, maybe this is more for you, where you have like really minimal cleaning, and then once you're kind of ready to paint, then you go and remove all the mold lines and all the seams and everything. I think maybe that's the only kind of upside that I see to this. But since I don't really play unpainted stuff ever, because I'm a maniac like that, well, I don't see a big value in there. So again, there are pros and cons to cleaning your minis before or after you build them, but I don't think it's the end all be all, and I don't think. Yeah, I think you find a way that works for you, and that's kind of the thing. I like my way because it's very straightforward. All the steps in order, and then it just kind of works. However, my way is boring as shit. So I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. It's boring as shit. I that's why I find like shortcuts, like watching movies and batching up jobs and doing it like in a large enough scale so that it's boring. One day a week or one day every other week if I'm lucky enough that I'm not painting that much that week. So let's just dig into, do you build your miniatures before or after you assemble them? Do you remove? Sorry, obviously you build them. What the fuck? What the fuck is this guy saying? This guy on crack.